welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justmorefix.com or on Twitter at justmorefix. If you like us, you can support us at Patreon, and you can give us a rating and review at iTunes wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to talk about lessons we've learned from playing Night Witches. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix. Welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. A couple quick announcements before we get things rolling today. So you may have noticed we missed an episode last week. Things were being a little crazy here around the house, and we've had quite a bit going on and different things getting put together and in process, lots of games being prepped and all kinds of stuff. So we missed an episode last week, and there was a giant plague that went through our house as well, which was really the largest source of the delaying of the episode. So sorry we missed you guys last week, but we are back on track again, and all three of our children are back and healthy again. As I'm always healthy, but Lacey is over the bug as well. So
Mostly.
we're back on track again. All right. So second announcement is we will be bringing another indie game day to Game in Terre Haute in February, and our last one we had a great time, and glad for everybody that came out to play some games with us. We got to play Skeletons, which was awesome. It was a different kind of a game to play, and it was kind of fun to play the bad guys. Or the memories almost of a tomb.
When I play it, I'm always the good guy.
Oh, well, whatever. And then we also had our third playtest of Troubadours, and I busted it out at an actual sort of game store, obviously, and then with strangers as well. So I think it went really well, and we had a great time, and I'm pretty sure I am going to bring it to HoosierCon and take it for a spin there and see how bad things go. So if you are a Patreon supporter, there are going to be some updates coming to the play materials there very soon, and I'm in process of sort of putting together a more detailed explanation of how to run the performance phase and that kind of stuff for the way the game is kind of works between two phases of like an offstage phase and an onstage phase. So that's all getting put together now, and it's going to be a little bit of work, and be posting updates on there as time goes by.
What are you calling the storyteller for it?
The director.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was saying it can't be like MC.
No. No, I went with
Troubadour. That's what I thought. Figured.
No, I went with director because it just made sense, and the MC sheets is what they are for like Apocalypse World or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's called the director's script. This is what I titled it at the top or whatever. So there's some fun nods to different things in there and that kind of stuff. So, but I learned some things, and as you do with any iteration of playtesting and stuff, so there are some changes coming to those. You should see those rolling out on our Patreon if you are a supporter. Mentioned HoosierCon already, so that's coming up in March, so we hope to see you guys there. The dates of that are March 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, and that is at the Wyndham Hotel in Indianapolis. So we went last year and had a great time. There's lots of board games to demo and different RPGs to play. We saw some minis, some X-Wing, all kinds of different stuff happening. So it's a great smaller convention and a great time. So hopefully we can see you guys there. And the last one is hopefully everyone did well in the great Gen Con Hotel lottery of 2019. So we've done better in the past, but we'll still be there at Gen Con because
Actually, point of fact, we have not done better since they started doing the lottery.
How was it done when we were at the embassy the one time?
It was...
Is that just first come, first serve? Is that what it was?
Yeah. We haven't gotten a downtown hotel room since they started the lottery.
Right. That's true. I guess you're right. That's kind of a bummer. I didn't even realize that.
I mean, I'm not bitter or anything.
Well, no. I mean, it's much more convenient and it's nicer, but
At a certain point, I'm just like, we could just drive from our house. Fuck it.
I had thought about that, but the drive back is what would suck. So
yeah.
I don't know. I'm used to driving a lot as it is anyway, and the drive to Indy for me is just sort of nothing. I do it in the blink of an eye now. But all right, so I think that covers our announcements for now, but if not, I'll just bust in with something. Special news alert, maybe.
Special news bulletin.
Special Just One More Fix bulletin. All right, so today we're going to talk about a few things that we have learned from running and playing Night Witches. And so they don't pertain specifically to Night Witches, but there are things that we have learned through doing the actual play and just in general playing in the Night Witches game. So we may do a couple of these as time goes by, but we've got two big ones that we're going to hit on today. And the first one is one that I have noticed, and it's probably only been me that has noticed this because I do all the editing, right? So we sit down, we play the games, it's all good, and we record it all, obviously. And once the recording is done, then I have to go back and edit it, which means I have to listen to all the audio over and over and over again. And the editing process isn't terrible, and it goes relatively quick. But one thing that I did notice is that once the session is recorded and I listen to it, I take notes as I'm listening to it to sort of pay attention to what happened in the session and things that I missed and didn't hit on or whatever. But it really gives me a chance to pay attention to the way I'm running the game, not the specifics of the mechanics that I'm using or whatever, which does come into play for where I've realized I've made some mistakes here and there, or maybe I would use a different move as opposed to the one that I did in this situation. But the actual way that I'm telling the story, so the tone of voice that I'm using, the pacing of my speech, every little bit, I hear it and I listen to it because, one, I want it to be good quality audio quality, right, for people to listen to, but I also want it to be a compelling story. And so it's made me really examine how it is that I go about running games, and specifically the way that I'm talking and the inflection of the voice that I use and all those little things. And we sit here and we talk about it on the podcast about how you talk and all this stuff, but in the moment, you really don't have time to examine that.
Mm-hmm. And
after listening to, we've put out 17 episodes, right? We've had 7 sessions at about 4 hours a session, right? And we do a really good job at staying on task when we're playing those games. So it's a lot of hours of gameplay. And it's the only time I've listened to myself run a game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were to imagine if you did any kind of presentation as a job, or if you were a stand-up comedian or anything like that, you're going to record yourself and you're going to watch and listen to yourself to troubleshoot what you do better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in all the time I've been running games, I've never done this. And this is the one thing that I have seen where when I run games now, I pay more attention to how I'm talking and what I'm doing in a way that I never did before. And I didn't even realize it. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, when you're talking about doing presentations, that makes perfect sense. But I was also thinking like, well, we do the same thing with like sports, right? We're like, okay, we're going to go back and look at the plays and see what we did. Because I mean, from the player point, I have listened to most of the sessions that we've done. I'm not completely caught up because it's a little weird because the release date is usually like one session behind what we actually recorded. So then but there are a lot of things that you forget, and the experience when you're playing it is completely different than the experience when you're listening to it. Because like when you're listening to it, it's just like entertainment. Right. But when like you're playing the game in the moment, like there's a goal. It's a game, you know, like you're trying to do the best thing for your character and you're juggling a lot of stuff in your head as it's going on. And yeah, so it's a lot different listening to it. And I don't know that I can say like a pinpoint like down, well, I changed this because I listened to it, because I don't think I really changed anything, but I enjoyed just like sitting back and listening to it. And there's for sure things that I had forgotten had happened, especially things that like other characters at the table did, because they're, you know, not directly influencing me. So then I'm like, okay, well, you know, I'm busy thinking about what my next thing is going to be.
Right. Yeah.
You try and pay attention the best you can, but
you
just forget things and things get overlooked. There's a lot that happens.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know, when I had this realization, it was in the middle of an editing session that I was doing. I was sitting down and I was doing a fair amount of editing, and I was re-listening to this one part that I don't even remember specifically which session or whatever it was, but I was re-listening to it again, and I thought how things had changed in that game and things that I was doing had changed. And it just made me realize in that moment that that's really the only way to actually make sure that you're improving.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been listening to RPG podcasts for several years, right? Probably 5-6 years, something like that, right? I've been a podcast addict for a long time. And no one anywhere has made this suggestion, right? Everyone talks about pacing and tone and planning or not planning or improvisation, all that kind of stuff. And there is validity to that, right? But essentially what you're doing is listening to someone and taking their advice and then trying to incorporate it under fire in the middle of everything, and then never troubleshooting anything that you do. Because if you run a game and you remember back and think about what you were doing, it's never exactly the same, right?
I don't think it's fair to say never troubleshooting what you do. I just think recording it and listening to it is better than, your after the fact memory. It's not to say that people aren't reflective about what they've done at the table and tried to,
I agree,
to improve it.
But I think our memories aren't as good as we would like to think they are sometimes when you're remembering how an event went or how you said something, right? Because there are times where I was listening to something and I realized I pay more attention now to how loud I'm speaking. So if I'm trying to build some intensity, I drop the tone of my voice lower and I speak slower and that kind of stuff. And I try to let words sort of hang in the air a little bit, right? But I realize that only by the fact that I have listened to these episodes and edited them and realized to take your time and to slow down, because I do talk fast, right? And that's just the way the pacing of my speech is, right? But it made me, listening to it, made me realize that and made me realize take your time and slow down. And like I make notes to myself of things that I want to do specifically with my voice, right? Not just, have this person betray whoever and do this and do that. Like those notes are important too, obviously, because you got to have to keep the plot going, right? But ultimately you're telling a story and your voice is sort of the vehicle that carries the emotion through all of this stuff. And you've got to find a way to make sure that if you, like, once you have the basics of running games and storytelling down, I really truly think if you want to sort of take things to the next, level of improving your running games, it really comes down to recording the sessions and then listening. And you don't have to edit anything, and the recording quality doesn't even have to be that good. You could do it on your phone, and it would probably be just fine. But listening to the way you speak, and then also listening to the way your players react and respond to what you're saying. So when you listen and you're trying to convey some heavy emotion and sadness and grief, right? And you're running this scene, and then, I don't know, the emotion doesn't come across the same way, right? And it doesn't come across with any gravity at all. And you know that because then you hear your players respond to it, and then you can listen to why, you can sort of troubleshoot what it was that you did to not carry that emotion, to convey that to them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's not a lot to say other than to just listen and take the time. And it can be frustrating because if you run a 4-hour session, well, it's hard enough to get people together for 4 hours to run the game as it is anyway, let alone to have 4 hours to sit down and listen to the session that you just ran.
Yeah, but yes and no. I mean, how much time are we all, really using when you're,
true.
Everybody's driving back and forth somewhere, or folding laundry or doing dishes. I mean, at least I hope somebody's like, doing the basics of cleaning their home.
Right.
That's, and is listening to yourself talk the most enjoyable thing? I don't know. But then again, you might be pleasantly surprised. Maybe you would really love actual plays and you're like, oh, hey, I could listen to us run this session all the time,
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you're publishing it or not, or if you're just recording it for your own benefit. But there's extra time. It's not like you have to actually read it. You just have to stick some earbuds in your ear. And
I know there's this thing about listening to your own and listening to your own voice, and a lot of people don't like that, but you do get used to it after a certain point, and it's not a big deal. And then there's a purpose behind it. So there's a difference in being like, I'm going to listen to us play this session, because I would probably not do it, right? But knowing that there's a purpose to it, I think changes that a little bit. And then having that purpose in mind, it gives you the moment to really reflect and be a little more critical and pay attention in a way that you probably don't necessarily do if you listen to any other actual play podcasts, because in that way you're consuming it for entertainment, like you said, and you don't listen to it with the same ear as if you're listening to it to try and improve yourself and to better your gameplay and whatever. It also tells you exactly how much spotlight time a character gets, because you're listening to it and you're like, oh, I never even hardly heard whoever it is talk, which means they got no spotlight time. So not that you need to break it down into seconds or whatever, and really track it exactly to make sure it's 100% even across the board. But if you listen to a 2-hour session and a person only talks for 15 minutes of gameplay, then that tells you something. It also tells you sometimes the game master needs to shut up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you listen to it and you're the only one talking, that's a problem.
Right, yeah. Well, and that's something I realized in the first few things was like, wow, and it was because we're trying to get the game off the ground. So you have
I think
to
it's
deliver
just
the
a
setting.
little bit, obviously your GM should be talking more in your session 0, because they're setting things up and you don't really know who you are yet and how you're involved in the world. But
Yeah, and then you can totally see it because you can just look right on the, depending on how you record it or whatever, if you have it as different tracks, I can look and see, roughly speaking, if the times are relatively equal or not or whatever, and it's just an interesting way to really troubleshoot the game and to sort of push things beyond where you're at. Because at a certain point, you can learn all the storycraft in the world and all that kind of stuff, but the actual oratory part, we don't do a good job of troubleshooting that. We just don't as game masters. So then you think every time is just a first one-off speech, and that's what you're doing. And you're never going to improve those moments because you're not actually trying to in a significant way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it could be beneficial to players too, because the thing that I've noticed in being recorded is that it really cuts down on the amount of out-of-player conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Not that it eliminates it by any means. But I think if you were to go through, because I only listen to the edited portion, but if you were to go through and listen to the unedited stuff, I would probably be still annoyed with just the general amount of fuckery that happens on my account.
I'm guilty of that as much as anyone else as well.
Mine's just like snide remarks. I can't let things go.
Well,
I have to say something stupid.
So I tried to pay attention and to some of our sessions where just our regular run-of-the-mill games or whatever. And I would probably say the ratio is somewhere between 60-40 and 70-30 of actual game content and then sort of smoking and joking or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's not an issue at our table. It it varies from week to week,
And I wouldn't get rid of all of that.
No,
for
I
anything,
agree.
Because, we're all friends, and that's
Absolutely.
part of the experience too. And all of the pregame stuff, that shouldn't count.
No, yeah, I agree. But when we were playing Night Witches, it's down to about 80-20 probably, and sometimes even less, because when you put the mics down in front of someone and it's like, hey, we're here to do this thing, and it makes it more of an event as opposed to just this gathering of friends where we play a game. And
there's a little bit of performance to it too. I'm not going to say it impacts the decisions that I make for my character, but you definitely feel like this drive to be like, okay, we're doing this thing, so that's what we're doing right now. So you need to stay in character and try and...
Do you feel more pressure to be on?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Does it affect how you, now this game we only play generally once a month, maybe sometimes every 2 or 3 weeks, just depending on how our schedules go, right? Mm-hmm. But do you feel like how do I say this? You've already said that you feel like there's more pressure to be on, but has that affected you in a way that I don't want to play this game today, so I don't want to be on, but I have to be?
No, not at all. I look forward to this game because it's fun.
I know it's a great
game. So maybe if it was a game that I wasn't enjoying, and then it was like, oh, we're already doing this actual play. Oh man, I've got to really pretend to be interested right now. Yeah, I really like this game. So, and it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't impact my decision. So I don't think, we're recording it. Like the people might like it if I do this. No, I don't care. I don't care about you guys. I'm in it for me. Yeah, it doesn't affect the actual decisions for the character. It just cuts down. I try and focus more and stay on task more because, so we can get more of it done, I guess. I don't know.
Right on. I was just curious because I think if I was to listen to a game as not to critique the way I'm running it, I'm not sure that I would want to listen to a game that I was playing in unless I really wanted to take notes about something that happened that I missed or something that I was, unclear on or something.
I think it's made me realize how much my notes are lacking for a game. If you're not taking any notes at all at a game, you are forgetting all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But I've always been a note taker. But even going back and listening, it's amazing at how many things that happen that are important that are not represented on my notes. And some of that is you get kind of sucked into the game and you forget to write things down as you go. But I found even at the very end of a session, if I sit and think about it for a minute and write some key things down that happened, that's better than... light years better than nothing.
Yeah. Well, I can tell
going
you,
back and listening is the best form of trying to remember what it is. You have all of it, but
well, I can tell you in terms of taking notes as a game master, right? So I keep notes as we play, and then when I listen to the episode and I edit it, I have paper in front of me and I take notes there as well. So I get
can I ask? Do you take notes chronologically or by subject? So do you have like a section like, okay, these are all the things that had to do with the Prince of Darkness, and so this is his section, and I keep the
so
or do you just go in order?
No, okay, so this is.
Section.
I'm
just curious.
I'll let you peer into the madness that is my notes. Okay, so in the session, like
maybe
when
we probably have a whole episode on note taking.
I'll probably could, yeah. This may further develop into that, but
I'd never thought it's just like the planning thing, right? Where I'd never considered that there's more than one way to go about it.
Right. So the way I do it is we sit down and there are 4 players in this game. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I take my piece of paper. It's a plain white sheet of copy paper, and I fold it into quarters. Okay, 2 top and 2 bottom, right? Basically 4 rectangles. And then whenever you do something as Yulia or whatever, right? In the seat that you are sitting in that corresponds to the square on my paper, that's where I make notes for what you do. And I do that for every person around the table. And that way it doesn't have to necessarily be in any order, but I know that way anything in this box pertains to Galia or to Dasha or
do
whoever.
You have like a section for general session?
That goes in the middle.
Okay.
So because I write pretty small anyway, and there's a fair amount of real estate on the paper because my notes don't have to be great because I know I have to listen to this again, right? So generally when I'm making notes, it's making notes for me for things to remember to incorporate again into the session. So this is going to happen, and you saw this person in the forest, and I want to reference that again. And this person, it was dark, and you couldn't see who it is. And in that case, no spoilers here or anything, but there was a person who was encountered in the forest, and you guys couldn't see their face. I hadn't decided who that was yet, so I was making notes about who it could be. Not necessarily who it was, because I hadn't really fully decided yet. I want to do something for dramatic impact. And so I was back and forth about what to do, and was sort of trying to keep track of that stuff so I didn't contradict myself. You know?
Just in the last session?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize you didn't know who that was going to be.
No. I just busted that out there. I
was the most logical decision. Like, that's who I would have picked if I was planning. I'm just surprised you didn't pick ahead of time.
Oh, I knew. No, I'm not going to.
No, it's fine.
We'll talk later. I don't want to, because they're still in the middle of session 6. They haven't even made session 7 yet. So
no, I know it's not out yet.
There's a lot of stuff that happens. So there's a whole lot, because they're right at session 6 right now, the very first half of it, where the cracks are forming in your guys' loyalty.
Because I think when we recorded that, right, like I said it before you did, I was like, oh no, it's gonna be so and so.
Yeah. All right, so
that was one of my couldn't help it moments.
Oh, I'm sorry. There is one more thing I have one more really, really important thing. And this is something that I was an unintended benefit of this, okay? It's pretty clear when you listen to this that you're going to be able to tell, is my tone of voice correct? Is my inflection the way I want it to be? How terrible are my accents or whatever it is, right? The pacing. Is the story hitting the right beats at the right moments? Is my climax at the right point in the timeline of the amount of time that we have the game, right? The biggest unintended benefit that I got from this was there were points where I could tell by you and Carrie and Holly and Taffy's tone of voice, things that had more impact that I didn't necessarily realize. Because I could hear it in your voice, the way you reacted to certain things, or maybe you said something and I didn't even catch it, and I realized, I need to. This is something that I could tell that had some gravity to you, and I need to reincorporate that. So those are so. There's 2 sort of note taking styles that I have.
Do you have an example that comes to mind when you're thinking of that?
Early on, Taffy, her character Dasha, had made references to her grandfather, and there was a point where we were talking about where the Russian front was advancing and how close it was getting to Moscow, and she was asking whether it affected her father's farm or not, and I wasn't taking the. She had a lot more importance on that than I had placed on it, right? And I just was I wasn't blowing it off, but I was kind of making it to where it's not an issue right now. And I could when I listened to it, I could tell by the way she was asking, because when you're really interested in something, you can tell it in a person's voice. And that's the one that jumps out to me right away, is that it was that moment, right? And then there was another couple parts where I realized how impactful some things were when Yulia and Galia's plane crashed, and you had this moment at the barn, and there's the 2 children with the grandparents and stuff. And then I don't want to, in case you haven't listened to it, you may want to skip for about 30 seconds here, but Gallia shoots the grandmother, right? And then that moment, Holly was, oh no, like out.
Yeah, she shut down.
Yeah, she was very, like it hit, the point was driven home very well. And I knew it got her, but I don't think I realized how much it got her until I listened to it, and then I was like, wow, like that was real and raw, and in those, I was one.
It creates an ongoing bond and complication with the rest of the remaining members of the family that last throughout the rest of the game, really.
And so, and then what it did is in listening to those moments and seeing those, it told me, I made notes on my paper. This is something that had impact. Refer back to these children, all these kind of things, the grandfather, all this stuff. Always come back to them whenever you can, because those are the things where hooks have been put into the characters and there's real emotion there and real connection. And those are the strings that you can pull on to have impact. Now, you don't want to pull on them in a trivial way, but if you can make connections between the two, between two events and and calling back to those moments, then you can have real emotional ties to those moments and call back to them. And which ones, because sometimes you think something had an impact that it didn't necessarily have, or vice versa, right? And it really gives you a moment to really hone in on what is working, because sometimes, like I said, sometimes you think something works and it doesn't, or whatever, but now because you've heard it, and you can tell it in a person's voice, right? So that was the unintended consequence of all of this, and I think that's when I realized this is the best way to become a good storyteller, is because now you're honing in on the moments of the story that are really hitting home for players, and really being able to call back to them and do them justice. But you also have to be delicate with it, because you don't want to do it too much, because then it breaks down and that kind of stuff. So it's just a good way to do things.
Is all of this like you're going back, so you're editing, right? And you're like, okay, I just listened to this last session and these are the things that stick out to me. So this is what I'm going to pull on for next game. Or has it actually improved what you're doing in the moment?
You mean like I'm listening to what we're playing right now and I change what I'm doing?
Yeah, like you're changing it in the actual session, or is it just things that you pick up that you may have missed that you're bringing in, like honing in on in the next session?
I think it's in my specific case, because I'm a very big improvisational kind of GM, right? I like to play things fast and loose so I can make things work the way that I need them to, right? In these cases, I think it's more things that I'm picking up on after the fact to draw in later, because a lot of them you already notice, because this
is not like a one or two time I listen to this session and it changes the way I GM. It's more of a ongoing going back and listening to the previous thing to make adjustments for the next session.
I would never, it's very definitely an ongoing thing, because when you're running the game, it's sort of real time, right? And you're in the trenches and in the fire and trying to figure out what to do and how to go about doing things, right? But then when it's time to sit down and edit it and you're thinking about the next session, now you're hearing the game for the second time and now there's no pressure. So you can pause it and make some notes and say, I don't know which way to take this thing and I'm having this idea. And then you continue to listen some more, and then you see how the players respond to certain things or whatever. And it's a great way to troubleshoot what's happening in the game. And yeah, I don't know. So
I guess but you're only doing this for the one game.
Correct. Right now.
And not like every game that you're running.
Right.
So I don't know. Is there...
Okay, let me...
what I'm trying to say, I don't know. Is there something actionable that can be gained? Like if I were to just do this for a couple sessions, do you think that it's still worth doing? If it's not an ongoing process.
Yes, because I very definitely, in every game I run, I very definitely pay attention to my voice more.
Okay.
Because everyone has their own habits and their own pacing for the way they speak, right? So I know I talk fast. So when I'm sitting down to run some of these games and I know I'm getting to an emotionally intense part where I want to have gravity to it or more horror to it or whatever, I know, because of the way I've listened to myself and to try and improve that, to say, I know in the back of my mind, I just need to slow down. I need to I'm loud, right? That's just my nature. I need to talk lower. I need to talk slower. I need to, take my time, sort of that Hitchcock kind of a thing,
Mm-hmm.
the monster they can't see is 10 times scarier than the monster they do see. And in that same way, when you just your pace of speech, if you listen to great actors, you watch a movie that has great actors in it and you close your eyes and listen to them speak, you can pick up on that stuff. And I think the best way to troubleshoot it for yourself is by recording and listening to yourself.
Okay.
Now, I will say, I think that if it wasn't for an actual play, I don't know that I probably would not record every session of something, but I will say that if I wanted to run an emotionally intense game that has more than just hack and slash stuff, something that is a little more political, maybe a little more social game, with some emotional intensity to it, I would be more inclined to record those sessions than I would say a standard dungeon crawl D&D session, because you're looking for two different things. In one case, you're looking for more of generally speaking, the player's looking for something a little more tactical, a little more crunchy, run in adventures and mayhem, right? Whereas in the other case, players are looking for more of an emotional investment. And that's the way you troubleshoot that is the best way I think you troubleshoot that is by listening to these sessions and really seeing what you're doing and what you're not doing. All right, so that's the first big thing. Now, the second one was an unintended benefit of doing this, was that I mentioned letter writing at some point in the game, and someone was like, hey, can we write letters? And I was like, absolutely. And so letter writing has become part of the process now, and I really enjoy it. I've only written one letter, but I had a lot of fun doing it. But it really has been a way more for the people playing the game to sort of find a new way to interact with the setting and the scenario and the characters.
Well, and it's not expressly mentioned in the game, but on your character sheet, it does ask you who you write to.
Right.
And it's a big part of being a soldier.
And that time period, and correspondence is just a big piece of it.
So I think it adds a lot emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I don't know, to me, it adds a lot of character development that you wouldn't otherwise have, because it's almost like a monologue, right?
Oh yeah. Well, it basically is.
So it's an intimate moment between your character and someone else that is all yours without any, I guess I'm gonna call it GM interference. That feels a little like negative, but
right.
You know what I'm saying. So it's something that I've really enjoyed. It's kind of strange at first, though, right? Because just being a person that lives in the now, how many letters do you really do you really write? And like in that time period, it contains everything from major critical decisions and impactful moments in your life to small trivial things,
right?
It's kind of everything. So I don't know, they're really cool. It's got me wanting to go back and read letters that were actually sent during the war.
Oh, right.
And I know there's a wealth of them out there, and I've read a handful here and there, but yeah, I would like to go back and actually read some of them. I think it would make my my letter writing during the game more meaningful, to be able to have some examples to draw from. But
one of the things that I realized, and we've never had anything like this in any games that we've played before, right? There may have been some clues that we've had that had some letters or something in some of the gumshoe games that we've played in or whatever, but nothing that was a personal touch kind of a thing. It was more of a functional piece of the investigation as opposed to a personal touch, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I have liked about it is it gives you a better sense of who the character is outside of the game, or outside of the war. Because in this case with Night Witches, you're all Soviet soldiers in the Second World War. And so all of you weren't soldiers before this. You were all just normal Russian women doing whatever it was that was your life. It's an interesting way for me as a game master to see what you guys envisioned your life beforehand and how it's changed. And Carrie's kind of done that with the way she's sort of keeping up this facade that she's still at university to her parents, right? And it's been interesting to see that. And it's been interesting to see how Dasha and with Taffy with Dasha is like writing home to her grandfather to see, and one of the things that I'm kind of curious to see is that in the game it mentions writing letters to people who are dead, right? As like a remembrance thing or a confessional thing.
That's kind of what's going on with me.
Yes. And I think it's interesting to see because then it's like it frees you in a way because you know no one is going to read this, right? And then it also is like a therapeutic thing because you're writing to this dead person and maybe you're confessing some things or whatever, letting your guard down a little bit. And it's been an interesting way to see the not I'm a badass part of the characters, right? And you could very easily incorporate this into any game, no matter how gritty or whatever. The most evil, chaotic party ever is still going to write letters home to whoever, their mom or whatever, unless you're a total murder hobo and you have no attachments to anyone in the world, which is just boring and lame. You're going to write to someone. So encourage your players to do that. And if, I would encourage them to do it in the downtime between games because then you can really take some time, write it, think about it, and troubleshoot what you want to put in there. And maybe you do a couple of versions or something, but it's fun to sort of channel the mindset of that character to sort of let that all spill out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And it's very much applicable to a range of different games. So it seems a little difficult at first to picture it in, like a fantasy game that's set before, the post office is a thing.
Right.
But if you look at like Harry Potter, for example, there are loads of letters that you get to see that are sent by owl back and forth. And, to have some kind of magical messaging system is not at all outside of the realm of possibility. Right. And it adds so much to character development that I definitely think that it's worth pursuing.
Well, it gives a bigger voice to the characters too. And I think you touched on it earlier when you said it's a way for you to take some agency in the game where the GM doesn't have any part of this. Now, you also are going to consider that the GM is going to incorporate what you write in letters because by writing that letter, you're telling him what you're interested in. So on both sides of that, it's a way for the players to tell the GM, hey, this is something I'm interested in exploring. And then also, so it gives you agency in the game to say, hey, please put more of this in the game, right? And for the GM as well, it gives you the chance to say, I don't know what direction I want to take this game. I'm going to let my players tell me a little bit of what they want to see, and then I can incorporate that with my own vision and make this sort of story soup, right? And push things forward or whatever. And it's an easy way to give spotlight time. So maybe if you have a character or a player who doesn't get a lot of spotlight time or doesn't feel inclined to take it, they're more kind of a more standoffish player. If you give them the opportunity to write the letter, sometimes it's easier for those style of players to write that stuff down, right? And to not open themselves up at the table necessarily, right? And then once the moment comes and they read the letter, or if they're not comfortable reading it out loud, you can, as a game master, you can read it out loud, maybe in the voice of the person they're sending it to or whoever. So in our case, I have you guys read them because I want them to be in your voice because you wrote the letter, right? But it doesn't really make any difference one way or the other who does it. But it could be a great way to draw out players who aren't as proactive at the table, and then you may never know what they want to see more of in the game because they don't tell you at the table if they're not very engaged. But when they write you that letter, well, now you know, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the ways because when we first started playing, we didn't know Taffy really at all.
I hadn't thought about it before. It's good.
And then she wrote, talking about her grandfather, and she wrote that letter, and I was like, okay. And then I sort of, because it was an easy way for me to sort of draw out how she saw her character, because I didn't really know, and then what she wanted for that character in a way and whatnot. So it's been a great tool, and it's one of the newest things. These are the two newest things that I have learned in gaming in a long, long time, and I've been super excited about them. So it's very cool. Ronald, do you have anything else about letters or letter writing?
I wonder sometimes about stuff like this, depending on how, what kind of players you have around the table. Like sometimes it's difficult to get people to do things between sessions. Mm-hmm. So I would just say that it doesn't have to be super lengthy. And I think once you start incorporating it, that the players will enjoy it, because that's what I've found. And it seems like the other people at the table that we're playing with enjoy it as well. And, so even if it's just, okay, we're taking a short break, if you set up a specific letter writing phase to kind of grease the wheels and get people used to it and get things moving, so that you can actually get it at the table, that might work a little better out the gate than saying, okay, did anybody write a letter since last session?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, and there's always, you can reward them for it too. You can give extra experience or fate points or whatever it is. And that's an easy way to sort of, encourage it to happen. And in terms of pacing, what I have gone to now is I think I'm just going to start every session with a letter, right? And then when we take a 10-minute break or whatever for something, when we come back, generally when we've done that, it's sort of like between a day phase and a night phase or something. And then we'll start that when we come back with a letter. And something else that sort of inadvertently does is it's when you first sit down, they're sort of getting themselves in the mode to play, the right mindset for it or whatever. And those letters, it's sort of an in-character, out-of-character thing where you're sort of getting in the mood to be playing, right? And sort of getting your creative wheels moving and that kind of stuff. And it's an easy way to sort of prime the process to make getting started easier.
Well, and it fits in pretty naturally in Night Witches because there's a day phase. And you can say, kind of what things are you guys doing in your downtime? And then you sort of think about all the things you can do at a base and what the normal sort of soldiery downtime things would be and try and emulate that. But if you're running maybe, like a D&D campaign or Pathfinder or something that's a little bit more, traditional gaminess or whatever, there's always that point at night too, where it's like everybody's setting up watches or doing this. And that would be a good time to say, okay, so, it's those hours between dinner and when you would normally go to bed. What are you going to do with your time?
Right.
Are you writing to anybody? Are you, journaling or what? Even if it was a journal entry, I still think that would be cool where you could, you could voice out loud, this is what my character wrote in their journal. That would be cool too.
I agree. Yeah. The journal is an interesting way to incorporate things for your murder hobo characters that have no one to write to, right? Or maybe you're not in a place where you can send letters. You're back in the back country somewhere and there's no way to send post or something, but you can still write these letters and then you're sort of putting them away to wait to get there somewhere where you can mail them and stuff.
I think I'm kind of extra into it right now because I'm listening to the Dracula audiobook. So that is entirely letters back and forth to people, diaries and journal entries and telegrams. Like that's the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. 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 And the only one thing I will say is some players may feel kind of intimidated by doing this. And in our case, there's no expectations on it. It's sort of like a way for everyone to just write whatever they want. It could be as big of a deal or not as you want it to be. It doesn't matter. It could be some fluffy thing about just how there's, nothing but fun stuff and, butterflies and rainbows or whatever for this letter. And then the next one, as they get more comfortable with it, they may incorporate more dramatic tones and that kind of stuff into it. And they may start to have more of an impact. But even the ones that are just don't have a lot of gravity to them, it is a way for them to tell you, like I said, how they see their character when they're not, in adventure mode or fight mode or whatever that is. You know what I mean?
I think it's even a little bit more than that too, right? Because it can be in a work of complete fiction. So it's more than just how I see myself. It's like how my character wants to see themselves. Yeah. It's like if, how I would paint myself in the best possible light if I could, because I can, because it's a letter written by me. Yeah, exactly.
Me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, it's been a lot of fun for us at the table, and it's a great way to break things up or bring people back from breaks at the table and whatnot. And like I said, these have been the two most encouraging things that I have seen and changes that have impact for me and my gaming and my storytelling and whatnot. So I would encourage you guys to record your own sessions, assuming that everybody's okay with it. Tell them you're not going to release it to anyone or whatever. And
don't do it secretly. Oh, I recorded all of us, and you guys, there's way too much out of character conversation.
Right? Yeah. Well, that's something else that's interesting to do is a troubleshoot. If you're having problems at the table, are you really on the ball that much, or is it that much side talk and conversation happening and whatnot? So. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's really changed the way I sort of see and started to change the way that I do things. I'm kind of curious to see how we just started a Hot Springs Island game, and I'm kind of curious to see how this is going to change what I'm doing now and what that's going to look like. So I guess we may have an update at some point, and we'll see how things go. Right on. Alrighty, so you guys know we're a member of the Gunna Geek Network, so quick Gunna Geek promo for Intellectual Podcast, Season 6 premiere. David and Whitney return to kick off the sixth season of the Intellectual Podcast. Join them as they talk about the future, Whitney's progress in her journey to full-time actor status, and much, much more. So you can check them out. That's the Intellectual Podcast Season 6 premiere on the Gonna Geek Network. All right, well, I think that'll do it for us this week. So as always, thank you guys for supporting us and hanging out with us. You can support us at Patreon and get access to our Troubadours. And just recently I posted, I haven't used it yet, so we'll see how it works out, but I have a Night Witches PO2 die drop damage table chart thing that I made that is wicked cool. It may not be useful yet. We may have to troubleshoot it because we had such good rolls in the last session. There was no damage to any planes. So I was super bummed. I made this cool tool and didn't get to use it at all. Sad day.
I was really excited because I didn't want to be responsible for the devastation that's going to happen as a result of the tool.
Right. So that is up on our Patreon, as well as all the Troubadour play materials. And like I said, there's going to be some changes coming to those as we continue to play test that and it begins to develop a little bit more, as well as the instructions for Troubadours will be popping up there as soon as they are sort of written and proofread and that kind of stuff. So I think that'll do it for us, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can support us at patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix or follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix.